Excuse me, I have to go back to my green room here for a second. Okay. So my topic is mom and pop journalism in the digital age. You may be wondering what that means. And the first thing you do when you're invited to speak is to find out how long you have to speak, right? And so I asked Bill and Glenda, and Bill said, well, I think about 15 minutes would be good. And Glenda said, well, my minister usually speaks for 12 minutes. And that meant a lot to me, being a Jew. So I said, okay, what can I do with 12 minutes? So I got a speech coach. That's my speech coach, Fidel. And I said, Fidel, I got 12 minutes. What do I do with that? And he says, 12 minutes, you clear your throat. And he said, by then you have them in the palm of your hand. And then you can go on for 3.5 hours like I do. So I'm not going to go that long. I promise I'll try to be as short as I can. And I turned this into kind of a chapter book with one chapter after another. There are 10 chapters, and if it's about a minute a chapter, I guess, if I stay good, and if I'm not good, and it's beginning to feel like the Bay of Pigs, there are drinks in the back. Okay? All right. So chapter 1, I call Awe and Shock. Now, many of you are familiar with the phrase shock and awe, but when I got into the writing game, it was definitely awe and shock, and I'll tell you why. It starts with this is about my family. It starts with my papa's papa, my grandpa. My grandpa was, and this is the awe part, a very important man. He was the president of the American Academy of Dermatology in 1941. He would be, by the way, today 127 years old if he were around. And sorry to say he didn't make it that far. But it was impressed upon me from the time I can remember how important my grandfather was. And I once asked my aunt, I am the third Richard in my family. My grandpa was a Richard, my father's a Richard, and I'm a Richard. And my dad was called Dick, and I was called Dickie. And I asked my aunt, I said, what did they call my grandpa? I said, well, I think they always called him Dr. Weiss. And you can imagine in first grade, Johnny here, Jimmy here, Timmy here, and Dr. Weiss present. Okay, so just how important he was. He's an author. He was what I think maybe was the first author in my family. And my dad was a great reader, and we had one of these bookshelves, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. And on the lower shelves were my books, the Golden Books and the Hardy Boys and stuff like that. And actually some Nancy Drew too. I was into Nancy Drew. I mean, what can I say? I was a girly man. Anyway, I look up on the upper shelves and I see a book with my name, surname on it, Weiss. And it's way up high. I'm wondering, why is that so high? It's out of my reach. And I climb up on the bookshelf, and it was not bolted to the wall. I nearly toppled the thing on top of my stuff. And I pulled the book down, and the title is a word I had never seen before, and I cannot pronounce. My grandpa wrote the book on syphilis. So that's the shock part. Awe and shock. And so, I don't know what the word is, don't know what it means, and I open it up and there are pictures. And actually, it's here tonight. Should you should you care to look at it. And so I go through, and there are two things that had a profound impact on me. Although I was, maybe 9 years old, I could tell that my grandfather had made a contribution to society through the written word. What this book is about is they discovered that penicillin works, but my grandpa was saying, you just can't give people penicillin and shoo them out the door. You gotta provide some therapy and counseling and so on and so forth. And this was a great contribution. And the other impact was that my puberty didn't set in until 29. So, you can actually find this on Amazon.com. And you notice, I don't know if you can read this here, it says, be the first to review this item. Guess who provided a review a couple days ago? I called it a seminal work. Chapter 2, take me out to the ball game. Oh, by the way, I am proud to say that writing is in my blood as a result of a sexually transmitted disease. Anyway, I want to get that in. Take me out to the ball game. I'm going to move into my father now, chapter 2. This was my team, St. Louis Cardinals. You may notice 4 people down at Stan Musial. He was my hero, my role model. I saw myself on the bench next to the Scrabini there, next to him, maybe this Rachel Watch or something. I was going to take his place. And you can see that I'm on my way. All right, but one day I bring home this report card. I don't know if you can see from the back of the room, but there's a certain consistency in the marks. M in reading, M in oral language, M in writing, M in arithmetic, M in written language, and this was before everybody was above average. All those M's stood for medium, mediocre. And you'll notice something that presages a career in journalism, also average social adjustment. And I've cut off the teacher's comment because that was a little too raw. So my mother,
yeah,
that's Helen Weiss, about age 35. Yeah, I feed off of her popularity. And kind of like I got that June Cleaver look going on, doesn't she? And she gets this report card and she is very upset. And she says, what's going on here? You're better than this. And I said, Mom, don't worry about it. I'm going to be a big league baseball player. So these marks don't count. I mean, does anybody ask Alex Rodriguez about what his grades in grade school? No, I don't think so. So, you've heard of these people who, they say, speak truth to power, right? My mother had this gift for speaking truth to small children. And she said, Dickie, I have seen you play baseball, and if I were giving you marks for playing baseball, they wouldn't even approach these. Oh, breaks my heart. So, I would also like to say that my mother also spoke truth to power, and I was an observer of this. And I'll just tell you one little anecdote. By the way, here's another picture of her. You'll notice that she's standing, this isn't an accurate picture because she's standing just to the left of John Kerry. She should actually be way far to the left. Card-carrying member of the ACLU, spent my inheritance on so many failed liberal Democrats, I cannot tell you. But the one thing, the Boy Scouts have been in the news lately, okay? Some issues with gay scout leaders and things like that. And in the old days, and Maxine maybe can attest to this, I don't know. In the old days, this came up in the 70s. And my mother would go to the chief executive officer and she'd say, we can't do anything with the Boy Scouts anymore. Don't do anything with the Boy Scouts. And tell telling a chief executive officer of a major company in St. Louis that they cannot wrap themselves in the flag of the Boy Scouts. Some of them were Eagle Scouts, I'm sure. And they'd say, go away. And my mother kept coming at them. Kept saying, no more Boy Scouts. Girl Scouts good, Boy Scouts bad. And did they follow her lead? Did she win? No, she didn't, but that didn't keep her from trying. And that was a lesson that she taught me.
Yes.
Okay, chapter 3. I call this Taken to the Cleaners. So, this is my dad, Richard Weiss. And I got to tell you that I wanted to actually put my dad on waivers. Wanted to trade him in because he was terrible playing catch. And I was terrible at throwing the ball. And so I would get to maybe throw the ball over his head twice, and then he would just quit. Okay. Terrible, terrible father. I learned, as my worship with Stan Musial continued, that Stan had a son named Dick. And I thought, maybe I can just pull a switcheroo. Okay? So, but the one thing about my dad that I really admired was that he would sit at his typewriter. He was a news producer at Channel 5. And I don't think Lisa Zigman was old enough to work with him, but she probably had heard of him. And he had a manual typewriter. And some of you may remember those. When I started off in the business, I actually used one. And he would write stories. He wrote, I always like to say, he wrote for the finest journals in the land. He wrote for the New Yorker, he wrote for the Atlantic, he wrote for Harper's. They didn't publish anything he wrote, but he'd send them one manuscript after another. And he would sit in front of that typewriter and he made it sound like a machine gun. He was so fast, and then he'd throw that character over to the right, and he'd type some more, and then he'd throw it again, and it was just such a neat sound. Now, I think I might want to do that. And those are, in the foreground, are his rejection letters. There's some others. But my dad worked nights. I actually did not see him much during the week. I'd have to stay up till 10:30. Actually, you could time it. He would come in right when Johnny Carson finished his monologue. And so we had the weekends together, and of course, certain things had to get done on the weekends. One of them was going to the cleaners. This cleaners in particular, how many of you know Marquard's? You know that it's a kind of what you call an upscale cleaners. I just checked the prices just this morning for this, did research for this speech. And a shirt at Marquard's is, a laundered shirt is $3.50. And it's kind of $2 1/4 for everybody else. And my mother used to send everything to Marquard's. We would, tons of stuff. And when she died, we sent Marquard's a sympathy card. At any rate, he would take me to Marquard's, and if I was good, here's another. If I was good and patient, he would then take me to Howard Johnson's, where we would have ice cream sodas. And he would rivet his attention on me, and we would talk about what life would be like if somehow I did not make it to the major leagues. And my father, in a very subtle way, groomed me to be a writer. And what he did, you've seen probably the movie The Great Santini and all these dads who were like, you gotta be this or you gotta be that. It would, of course, have given him great pleasure if I would be a writer, but it was just a possibility. And I think what good parents do is give their kids a sense of possibility. Okay? So, I was really interested in continuing that tradition, and I had 3 girls. And so I would take them to the cleaners. Now you notice we're over here at Clayton Cleaners. where a shirt is $2.25 because of my mother's profligate spending on liberal Democrats. This is all we could afford. Now you will notice that one child there, the one on, let's see, the right, looks as if, yes, let's just check this out. Yes, she's giving what you would call the finger to the photographer, who happened to be me. Now, it isn't what you think this is, because something happened at the cleaners that involves the finger, and it goes to the point that what I was trying to pass on from my father, you'll do errands with me, and then there'll be ice cream sodas afterwards, and we will talk, and we will bond. They were not particularly interested in. My girls had a life. They had friends, and what they wanted, and what the cleaners was a delay until they could be with their friends. Okay, so I'm stopping at the Clayton Cleaners, and I'm getting the stuff, and Elizabeth's in the car, and she's getting bored. It must have taken all of 3 minutes, but she's, and she notices there's a little cigarette lighter in the car. And here she's reenacting here. She takes a cigarette lighter and says, oh, it's kind of orange and glowing. I think I'll stick my finger in it. And she did. Here's a little closer up shot. We really went all the way with this. And I get back in the car, and I notice she's sitting on her hands. And I said, anything going on? No, Dad, just take me over to my friend Anita's house, and everything's fine. 20 years later, she tells me the story about how she gets out of the car, runs into the house, which, by the way, is the home of our rabbi, and reports that she's self-immolated. And so this is the legacy that I'm trying to pass on. Okay. So now we go on to chapter 4, which I'm calling the mamas and the papas. So I got kind of fixated, as you might imagine, on in my journalism and doing profiles, and I did many on many people. One was on Terry and Alan Millman, who did Library Limited, and I asked them about who's your mama, who's your papa. And they told me some very interesting stories. And then there was one, let's see if I can get this to come, Al Kurth, who was a civic leader in town, died tragically of suicide in 2002. There was Richard Barron, who I'll talk a little bit more about later, a developer. And then there was Maxine Clark. So of course, I had to ask Maxine, I have to get my other glasses here, about her mom and dad, and what was it about the way she was raised that had an influence on the kind of person that she became. And so if you'll indulge me, I will read a little bit of what I wrote. And it starts off kind of sad, believe it or not. This is an excerpt. Clark's own teddy bear story is kind of grim. His name was Teddy, of course, and he had been with Maxine since birth in Coral Gables, Florida. Wherever Maxine went, Teddy was sure to follow, except on the day the family went to Grandma's Kitchen. Maxine, that's a restaurant, by the way, right? Maxine, then about 10, left Teddy in the back seat of the station wagon. While she was eating at Grandma's, he was snatched. Maxine and her parents looked everywhere, driving back and forth from home to the restaurant. Mom and Dad shrugged. She'd just have to go on growing up without him. 30 years later, Maxine found what happened to Teddy at her 40th birthday party. Her former neighbors, the Hales, presented her a new stuffed bear and confessed that Maxine's father had put out a contract on Teddy that they had fulfilled. Maxine's father thought she needed to grow up. Opening a chain of teddy bear stores might seem like sweet revenge, but a lot of the drive and motivation comes from Maxine's mother. Although Ann Castleman has been dead 26 years, and I guess it's now many more years than that, 40 years, Maxine says she talks to her mom each morning when she's getting ready for work. A picture of mother and teenage daughter sits on Maxine's dressing table. I'm not sure if this is a picture, but here is a picture.
That's it.
Is that right? Oh, cool. Maxine looks cheerful. Anne looks as if she's got things sized up and is figuring out what to do next. Maxine says the world was black or white to her mother. If you didn't see things her way, well, you could hardly carry on a conversation with her. She was upfront and frank with Maxine, sharing confidences as if Maxine were an adult. In Ann Castleman's opinion, you were put on earth to help other people, to use your brain, to make your mark. Otherwise, what's the point? Ann worked at a home for retarded children as a manager and fundraiser. These kids ought to be using their brains too, she believed, so she made sure the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts organized troops for them. If Ann had her way, Maxine might have become a social worker and had children. But Maxine was a product of the 1960s, when young women began moving out of the nurturing jobs into arenas where they had a chance to run the show. Still, Maxine shared her mother's zeal. She was going to change the world somehow. Otherwise, what's the point? So that's Maxine Clark right here. Give her a hand. So, in 2000, I wrote that story about Maxine in 1999. And in the fall of that year, I got very interested in a story that came to be called The Better Place to Grow Up. And it was about an effort by Richard Barron to help children at Jefferson School, which is just west of downtown. And Richard was a developer, and you might call this enlightened self-interest or just humanitarianism, depending on how you want to look at it. He led an effort to invest several $1 million in that school, and over a period of 6 years, in 7 schools in all, that fed into a Blewett Middle School, which is right near Jefferson, and then into Vashon High School. It was called the Vashon Compact. This was sort of the first year of that effort, and I was given the time to follow what he was trying to do, see what was going to work. And I found my way to a teacher by the name of Mary Spencer, and that's her. And a classroom, as I call them, a gaggle of kids. And one of them is here tonight, Avita Caldwell, if you will stand. And there were a few dozen others. And I wrote a series, those ran 4 parts, and it got me some nice recognition, and the story was very hopeful. Okay, now let us fast forward to about 2 years ago, and Avita and all those kids are all grown up. What happened to them? Well, 2 years ago, I get an email from Avita, and she says, I don't know if you remember me, Mr. Weiss, but I was in that class you wrote about, and I want to write a story in appreciation of my teacher, Mary Spencer, and I was hoping you could help me get it into the Beacon. And I said, well, sure, that's great. And her piece ran, and I thought that was terrific. I saw Richard Barron. I said, you should know that one of those kids turned out really great. She got a communications degree from St. Louis University and went all the way. And not long after that, I'm at a press club gathering. At the time, I was president of the press club, and it was my honor to hand out scholarship checks. And one of the people that came up to get a check was a young woman by the name of Ashley Westbrook. And I'm thinking to myself, as she's coming up, where have I heard that name before? And I said, Ashley, we know each other? And she says, yes, Mr. Weiss, I was in that class that you wrote about a long time ago. And so I'm thinking, well, this is interesting. Here's another great outcome. Wonder what happened to these other kids. Okay, now let's fast forward to about 4 or 5 months ago. I get another email from Avita, and she says, Mr. Weiss, I'm wondering if you can help me. I'm 2 years out of school now, and I haven't been able to find a job in journalism. And can you help me find an internship? And I said, well, Avita, what are you doing now? She said, well, I'm a pharmacy assistant at Walgreens. I'm making $10 an hour. And I'm thinking, I'm quitting that job, and I'm just not sure what I'm going to do. And I said, well, let's meet, let's talk. So, you know what I'm thinking? I'm going to take Avita to the cleaners. Avita. But instead of the cleaners, we went to Starbucks. And she wasn't impatient with me at all, and we sort of kind of hatched a plan. Said, Avita, what if we did a project that would demonstrate your skills, and would also look back at what happened to all those kids at Jefferson School and whether their outcome was as good as yours. And I expect in any school situation you're going to find good and bad and so on. We know already that one child made it to the NFL, which is not necessarily a good outcome. But we know that. And we have we're beginning to develop some intelligence around this. So we hatched a plan, and we decided that we were going to do a project where we would go find as many of these people as we can. We're going to do this in 2 ways. One is we're going to touch the heart. We're going to find all these children and find out what happened to them, or as many as we can. But we're going to also look at this clinically. What did 6 years of intensive civic corporate involvement mean? And what can we learn from it? And why did it stop? The Vashon Compact went out of business, and if you read the paper, the Post-Dispatch, a couple weeks ago, you will have noticed that actually a favorable, nice headline, but the fact is that Vashon High School is one of the worst performing schools in the state of Missouri. Why? We're kind of aiming to find that out. So I did want you to know that I put in a recommendation for Avita at Channel 4, and lo and behold, she got the job there as an intern. And guess what? Now she's making $7.50 an hour. Or actually, she reminded me of $7.35 an hour. But, it's a foot in the door. What can you say? And when she heard about the salary, she said, I'm going to get that cigarette lighter. No. I made her do that today. I said, Avita, we're going to do a sight gag. And she was down with it. My kids wouldn't be down with this sort of thing. But she was really cool about that. So that's chapter. So the other thing that really griped me was I think that what we do, journalism, especially enterprise journalism, long-form stories, serious stuff, should be compensated. I don't buy this. People essentially, freelance fees come to about, when you come down to it in the St. Louis market, come down to minimum wage when all is said and done for a serious story. So I said, we're going to crowdfund this. And I'm going to ask all my friends or anybody in sight who's heard of me or knows me, I'm going to ask them if they'll invest in Avita's work. And my formula was essentially, I want to pay Avita $20 an hour for the heavy lifting she's going to do in this story. I do not know how many hours it will be, but it'll probably at least 200. So I can't do the math, I'm in journalism, but I'll let you guys try to figure out how much that is. And so far, 55 people have donated anywhere from $20 to $500 for this effort. So chapter 7, now we're going to move quickly along. This is a lightning round, and you'll be glad to know. So chapter 7 is Avita's story. And chapter 8 is my story. What else can we do together as a community to do serious journalism. And then the third one is your story. How can you participate? How can we give journalists, writers, reporters, producers the right incentives to continue to do good work? It's needed now more than ever, and I might add here just an infomercial. One way you can do that is to attend the Media Person of the Year dinner, at which Robert Duffy will be honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award. I want you to know that right on your table is a form that you can fill out right now with your credit card or with your check, and you can give it to Glenda Partlow, our executive director, on the way out the door, and you will make her day. And there's nothing more that I want to do than to make Glenda's day, because she does so much for us. Okay, so now we're coming to chapter 10, which is the commandment. Okay? Number 5 on the hit parade: honor thy father and thy mother. Okay? So I'm wondering about this. Why is it only number 5? I talked to my rabbi, and she says, well, here's what you need to understand. It's in the middle. It is the keystone. It makes everything else possible. And this I do believe. And Evita, stand up for a second, if you would. You may notice that there are some differences between us. The first thing you'll notice is that she's 5 feet tall and I'm 6 feet tall. I'm sure that's the first thing you notice. You'll notice that she's very young and I'm very old. You'll notice that she's a female and I'm a male. But here's what we have in common. After we talked, the one thing that we want to do more than anything in the world is to make our parents proud. Thank you very much, everybody.